Welcome to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, where we discuss all things political, bringing you the top stories locally, nationally, and from around the world. I'm Ruben Abati, and This Day Live begins now. I'd like to welcome today's panelists, Professor Bola Akintenwa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Chike Ogea, former Commissioner of Information, Delta State, and Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Now, this week, let's start with the Supreme Court ruling in the BAYELSA case. That is PDP versus Bioborakuma Diego Eremienyo, the candidate of the APC. The Supreme Court on Thursday gave a ruling that dashed the hope of the governor-elect of the state, David Lyon, and his deputy, Bioborakuma Diego Eremienyo. The court sacked Lyon for presenting a running mate with a fake certificate in the November 16, 2019 governorship election in Bayelsa State. The Apex Court also declared the candidate of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, Duye Diri, as the authentic winner of the election. A five-man panel of the Apex Court, led by Justice Mary Peter Odili, ordered the Independent National Electoral Commission to withdraw the certificate of return issued to the All Progressives Congress candidates as winners of the November 16, 2019 governorship election in the state. Duye Diri has been sworn in as the fifth democratically elected governor by the state chief judge, who administered the oaths of office and allegiance on the governor at the government house Yenago at the state capital. The chief judge also administered the oath of office on the deputy governor, Lawrence Irujakpo.
I, Senator Duye Diri,
do solemnly swear
that
I'll be faithful
that I will be faithful
and bear true allegiance
to
the Federal Republic of Nigeria, that I'll preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Well, I mean, quite another eye-shaking moment, a few days ago, involving the November 16, 2019 gubernatorial election in Bayelsa State. And there have been many angles in terms of reaction to that development. There are persons who have said, well, shouldn't the Supreme Court have ordered, a rerun? There are persons who have said, well, political parties have lessons to learn from this, to be more diligent in checking the credentials of their candidates. And then, of course, the point has been well made that in the light of Section 187 of the 1999 Constitution, a governor must necessarily have a deputy governor who is his running mate, and that the two of them are Siamese twins. Yes. They are conjoined, they are inseparable in the eyes of the law. And if there's any defect on one side, it affects the other. However, the chairman of the All Progressives Congress had intervened to say that there has been a miscarriage of justice. And he was referring to a 1999 Supreme Court case, Balewa versus Moazu. But he erred in that regard because it wasn't a Supreme Court case. It was a Court of Appeal case. And in any case, it was also a post-election matter, whereas this case in Bayelsa, is a pre-election matter. But we need not go into the details. Let me start with you, Chike.
Well, I think I must start by saying that what we are seeing is a process. It has not reached its destination at all, not by a long shot. So if anybody thinks we've gotten to where we are going, then you better put on your seatbelt. It's a pity that we're getting to a situation where the courts are beginning to choose our leaders for us. It shouldn't be so. Candidates should be chosen by the electorate. But just like you rightly said in your intro, when we have a situation where the party, who should be the first level of screening, I mean, someone said he had gone for a screening. I had a friend of mine who went for a screening when he was going to run an election. And when he got there, the panel was just like, oh, how are you? What do you have for us? They didn't even bother looking at anything he brought. So why wouldn't these kind of things come up? So to that extent, I'm happy that this will start teaching our political parties to take seriously issues of screening their candidates for elections. But on the other hand, of course, I'm sad that they are getting the courts to descend into the arena unnecessarily. And you see, if, speaking as a lawyer, I can assure you that if we get to a stage where we start dragging our Supreme Court and bringing them into everything, now there's the Imo case that is on review. We are also talking about this one. There are other pre-election matters, even in this case, because there's a situation where we are hearing now that the deputy governor of this governor also has this problem. And I know that there's my friend Timia Laibe also has a pre-election matter where he's also saying that, you know, so these kind of things are things you don't want, because you see, it gives the whole process a jerky stop move, and it eventually will adversely affect governance, because governance has to be smooth. We already have too many challenges to now impose this one of not being able, you see, again, I also tie it to what is happening to us in America, where they are saying to us, you know, you are going to be banned. To us, are you an American? No, to Nigerians, where they are trying to ban us over this whole identification thing. This is all part of it. Because our identification processes are very weak. For how long have we been doing this Nigerian identity? National identity. And now if someone commits a crime in Lagos and disappears to Anambra, where will you find it? How do you find the person? And changes the name. Just the way, you know. So these are the things that are happening. It goes back to the substructure of our society. All our systems are still too weak. I mean, see what happened in aviation over the past 1 or 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Isn't that a shame? Right. We have to wake up. Well, I'm sure that if you look at the details, you know, there are many lessons to learn from, you know, the ruling by the Supreme Court justices. But you were referring to the jurisprudence of wasted votes. That's right. Which is a major source of concern. Yes, because you see, just before I cede the floor to my colleagues, basically, as I understand it as a lawyer, is that, yes, you, Lyon, and your running mate, you know, I can never pronounce any of those names, so let me leave that alone. Leon. Yeah, you are... Some people call it Leon, some people call it Lion. You know, you are disqualified. As it suits you. Yes. It has to be Leon because etymologically it belongs to a professor. Okay. If you want to call it Lion, don't let us worry about it. Don't let us worry about it. No, that's the thing. Please, Chike, can you carry on? Yes. Fly something else. So seriously. By essence, call it Lion. Okay. Those votes are gone. And what they are saying is that, because the argument now is about the spread, whether the PDP that came second in the election with the 143,000 votes, you know, has enough spread, the 2/3. They did. No, that has been determined. No, what I'm saying, these are the conjecture out there. It hasn't been determined. And that is on the basis of that, Oshomole was screaming that there's no government, there will be no government. INEC did the calculation and issued a statement. So they have calculated it. Even if INEC does that, there is not a court. So they still have a right. No, but numbers. They still have a right to go and determine whether it is going to be based on the total vote, because people are saying, no, the Supreme Court was very clear in that regard. I'm throwing the Supreme Court was clear, though. No, that aspect of it is. So let's not confuse our audience. As the Supreme Court, you know, I haven't seen the Supreme Court. It's available. It's available, and it says those votes, once they are voided, they are totally out. The Supreme Court was talking about what is left. Lawful votes. Yes. In the light of Section 179 subsection 2A. Now, if, you know, the candidacy of Leon and Barakuma, if it is void, if it is, you know, unacceptable, then whatever votes that goes to them, it's automatically void, because those votes are unlawful, because their candidacy did not exist in the first place, and nothing can stand on nothing. Summing up quickly, I just think that our parties should wake up to the responsibilities of screening their candidates. Yeah, let me have your take on this matter.
I think just to pick up on that, I think APC gambled, because they were quite aware of the deputy, at least in...
because the Federal High Court ruling was on November 12th, but it was too late to
That's exactly, so that's where I'm going. So the APC were quite aware, but it was too late to substitute. So what would have happened was that they would not have had a candidate. So basically where we are now is where we would be, except, let's take that, let me take that back, I take that back. Because what would have happened if APC was truly interested in participating fairly in this election? They could easily have said, look, and then, I mean, there were 40-something parties that participated. You could have had a conversation with any of the other parties and said, look, we unfortunately are not able to participate in this election. Who are we most aligned with? And we can have a conversation
like what they did in Rivers.
Exactly.
More or less what they tried to do with Rivers.
Tried to do Rivers.
Yeah,
exactly.
yes, which
who are we best aligned with that we can have a conversation with and negotiate what could possibly, and even in one of the Southwest states, there were negotiation with different parties. And they could have done that. Therefore, enabling APC supporters to participate in the election.
That's right.
What my grouse with APC is for their selfish reasons, basically to your point about unlawful votes, they've disenfranchised Bayelsans who wanted to participate and who, if they realized that APC was not didn't have a candidate, they could have chosen possibly PDP, possibly Accord, or possibly any of the other odd parties that were there. So for me, that's a huge problem. And I think APC, even for Mr. Shumale to still be talking when they made a very selfish call, I think it is quite disrespectful of Bayelsans for that stand. But also just to re-emphasize your point about the role that the judiciary now has is in determining. I mean, we had the spate of that in the Southwest from Ondo, some of the cases, Arebashala, Mimiko, even Fayemi, who came back from the court. Yeah. But and at that time, I don't recall that there were such heated conversations around the court determining, because for a lot of them, evidence of thumb printing, the evidence seemed to support the court's decision. That's right. But now, yes, the court in this case was right, but it's now looking for where else are these holes. INEC does not have powers to disqualify. INEC can only tell you that, well, you don't qualify based on the Constitution, but the court, INEC has a court judgment that says they must get a court order for them to enforce the Constitution. Yeah. So our judiciary is really making a mockery of this whole thing when anybody can run to court and quickly get a judgment.
Well, but you know, seeking redress in court is part of the electoral process.
It is part of the electoral process, but it's not to be abused. Nigerians are now joking.
No, that's my point. That, INEC has become the referee and the judiciary has become the VAR.
Yes, I saw that.
But I think to that point, I think is extremely important. Yes, seeking redress in court is part of an electoral process, but let's not make a mockery of it. If anybody can go to court to stop anything, even things, how can you require a court order to enforce the Constitution?
We need to go on a short break. When we return, I would like to have Professor Akintenuwa's input into this very important subject. It's time now for a short break here on Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show, here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akintenuwa, Director General, Bolitac Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Chike Ogea, former Commissioner of Information, Delta State, and Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Now, before we went on break, we were commenting on the Supreme Court ruling in the gubernatorial election case in Bayelsa. And I wanted to have your input, Professor Akintenuwa.
First point, who is determining our leader, our governor? Is it the court or the people? That was the question raised by, I think that...
XY.
Well, when you earn a title, it is there. Ikum, when he was deputy...
No, Prof. Let's just focus on this Bayelsa matter.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, that's just...
because he had
that's just my way. Let's focus on the Bayelsa matter.
Okay. In this case, it is neither the people nor the court who determines who should be the next people. The people vote. Now, you cannot vote for a candidate who is not eligible as required by the Constitution or the electoral law. The court itself is not determining who should be. The court is only determining which law is applicable to the case brought before it. So, the court, the Supreme Court, is only dealing with the issue before it. Mm-hmm. Now, in this case, you rightly pointed out that you cannot separate candidates, all right, holding a joint ticket. So, if one candidate is tainted or has a constitutional problem, then the other candidate also carries the same burden. And since, in this particular case, you now have the running mate having a constitutional problem, not having the required, qualifications, then I think the court is quite right to have decided the way it decided. And in this particular case, look, it's just like when we were talking about President Muhammadu Buhari, and we were talking about whether he had or he has, a school certificate. And then the court will now have to be interpreting so on and so forth. So you either meet the criteria required or you don't meet them. That's the first point. The second issue is this. You are talking about lessons to be drawn from the court ruling. You see, when political parties have a system of godfatherism, whereby they do not care about what the electoral law says, they just bring any candidate in the belief that this candidate is most likely to win or to draw more support from the public, from the electorate. But without espying what the law says, that is the critical lesson for them, like Yemi and Shike drew attention to. We are in a system whereby law doesn't mean anything. The politicians don't believe that they can eat their cake and still have it. I think that one should stop. We should commend the court, at least for addressing issues objectively. This is the way I want to look at it for now. So if we are able to sustain this attitudinal disposition of the court, addressing issues on the basis of law, I think that would be quite good.
Can I add something to that? But
so in other words, there should be respect for the rule of law by the political parties, and they should work on their internal democracy systems. Yemi,
just
quickly,
a quick one, the court must also, this is a pre-election matter.
Yes.
So even having said that APC acted badly and selfishly, people's votes were voided, if the courts had acted in a timely manner, then even if APC wanted to behave badly, they would not have been able to, because the matter would have been determined before election day.
It couldn't have been determined before election day, because the Federal High Court, Abuja, gave its ruling on November 12th.
So that's my
The election was on November 16th. And within the time frame available to the PDP, it was the PDP that, took the matter all the way to the Supreme Court. So
I understand that. And then it goes back to my point, pre-elections matter should be pre-election. That's what I'm trying to say. So whatever dates or scheduling you want to do, ensure that all pre-election matters are done before an election day. If that was done, we wouldn't be in this situation.
Well, that's what the Electoral Act tried to cure, but
it's still obviously it didn't work.
Anyway, let's take another topic. The Federal High Court, sitting in Nigeria's southern port city of Calabar, has granted bail to journalist and rights activist Agba Jalingo. Just after he was denied bail on 2 occasions, both on October 4th and October 30th, 2019. Agba Jalingo was arrested on August 22nd, 2019, few days to a rescheduled police interview, which was at the instance of a petition bordering on an article he wrote in July. The article asked the Cross River State government to come clean on the whereabouts of the 500 million naira approved and released for the floating of the Cross River Microfinance Bank. Now, after 175 days in detention, Agba Jalingo finally has been granted bail in the sum of 10 million naira and a bond by a surety in like sum. Now, this has generated a lot of public concern because people were saying, look, he has not done anything amiss. It's within the functions of a journalist to ask questions. Now, in the course of that controversy, the state governor came forward to say that the state government had no hand in the matter. But as it happened, the Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice in Cross River State, the same state, has taken over the matter. Now he's been granted bail. His plight speaks to the plight of similar persons who are in various detention centers across the country just for expressing an opinion. Yemi, what do you say to this?
I mean, enough is not enough this time.
Enough is quite enough, because I think, I mean, to your point, Agba is not unique in a sense. It's probably one of the more high-profile ones, as Yele was. Yele was also arrested in August, granted bail twice, until Justice Ojukwu gave an ultimatum. Foreign parties got involved. We organized a protest and was finally released Christmas Eve. Agba Jalingo also same thing. He got a doctor's order that he was sick at the point, but they were the doctors that attended him were willing to write to the police to release him for fear of...
That is the grounds for the bail application.
Exactly, for fear of sort of retribution. But, I mean, to the point around he's written, for the sake of argument, he wrote and asked for the 500 million. As far as I know, Governor Ayade hasn't provided any information on that amount of money. So the issue that started the case, in a sense, is still pending because he has not accounted for the money. You've kept the man in jail and said the state has no hand in it, but the state is now prosecuting the case. 3 different judges have changed hands, 1 recused himself. So, I mean, all of this is happening and a man's life is in the balance. And I think this, as we keep talking about our judiciary, we're using judiciary for elections, we're using the judiciary to oppress, we're using the state to oppress, and it's, yeah, it's quite disturbing, I should say. Well,
Chike, what would you recommend? Should the Attorney General of Cross River State just enter a nolle in this matter and let Agba Jalingo move on?
Well, basically, like flowing from what Yemi said, we have issues of the Freedom of Information Act, which I think has been domesticated in a lot of states. I don't know whether it's been domesticated in Cross River State. And then from the point of view, you know, that's the way you always introduce me here as a former commissioner for information. Maybe we should stop that soon, and I'll tell you what I'm doing currently. but the truth is, investigative journalism is what journalism should really be all about. So when a journalist actually goes, you know, behind the veil and unveils facts, whether factually or, you know, whether they are true or not, I mean, that should be proven in a court of law, but it's not something that all of a sudden we start hearing he's been charged for gun running, for high treason, you know, all because persons are in a position of power. I don't care. You see, when I sit here, I always say this, I speak frankly to the issues. I'm not about PDP or APC. You know, I say it as it is. And I think everything that happened in Agba's case is a terrible miscarriage of justice, is a show of power. Well,
just be careful. The matter is still before
the court. I know it's sub judice, I know. But I'm even talking about the administrative thing, the processes. Exactly. I'm not talking about the matter being sub judice. Exactly. Yeah. I'm not speaking to that. And just those processes of how our politicians and our leaders, you know, tend to use power. I just think, you'd hear today, it's gone tomorrow. And so what's all this all about?
Well, quickly, Prof, what's your take in this matter? Agba Jalingo.
I think we should address the problem. The observation is that the expression, free expression, to suggest, to have, to hold an opinion, is now increasingly being interpreted to mean an act of a treasonable felony. Now, the mere fact that to hold an opinion that is not consistent with the interest of government is easily seen as an act of terrorism. Now, Nigeria is therefore treading along a path that has the potential, all right, to undermine, to threaten in a very serious manner the foundations of democracy. Why? It's clear. Now, if Jalingo purports that Governor Ayade had not accounted for the 500 million naira meant for the purposes of microfinance, Yemi rightly pointed out here, what is the situational reality with the money? It has not even been accounted for. What is happening? So you need to deal with the issue at stake, rather than now bringing cases of having done this, having done that one. Why should he be giving bail on the 175th day? He has been there for what?
Well, Prof, you cannot be more correct. And on that note, we'll take another short break here on Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show, here on the Arise News channel. I still have with me here in the studio Professor Bola Akintonuwa, Director General, Bolitac Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Chike Ogea, former Commissioner of Information, Delta State, and Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director. Enough is enough. Now let's take another subject. The Defense Headquarters of Nigeria has accused Amnesty International of deliberately supporting the acts of terrorism perpetrated against Nigeria by the Boko Haram and the Islamic State of West African Province, ISWAP, terror groups. Acting Director of Defense Information, Brigadier General Onyema Nwachukwu, in a statement, cautioned the group to put an end to its reckless distortion of facts in its bid to satisfy its puppeteers by undermining Nigeria's military campaign against terrorism in the Northeast. According to the statement, and I quote, the Defense Headquarters has taken cognizance of yet another false report by Amnesty International in a campaign of calumny targeting the Nigerian military and deliberately supporting the callous acts of terrorism perpetrated by Boko Haram terrorists and the Islamic State of West African Province. Meanwhile, protesters on Tuesday besieged the Abuja office of Amnesty International, asking the rights watchdog to leave Nigeria. The protesters who arrived at the office located at Maitama in Abuja at about 12 noon barricaded the road leading to the entrance. They accused the organization of fueling insecurity in Nigeria and unduly interfering in the affairs of the country. Well, Yemi, you must be very familiar with this kind of conduct on the part of state authorities in Nigeria. And now we have also again some NGOs. They call themselves concerned Nigerian citizens. Hallelujah. I don't know whether they represent us sitting here. Last year, August 2019, you had quite a number of these protesters, pro-government protesters, blocking the entrance and the exits along 34 Colorado Street, Maitama, Abuja, which is where the headquarters of Amnesty International is in Nigeria. And they spent 5 days saying that Amnesty International should leave Nigeria. They've repeated the same thing this year, but the good news is that Amnesty International spokesperson says Amnesty International Nigeria refuses to be intimidated and that they will continue to expose all cases of abuse and impunity on the part of government or any other state actor in Nigeria. Yemi?
I think one of the misconceptions is that Amnesty International is a foreign organization. Yes, it was founded outside of Nigeria, but the way they operate is that their local chapters across the world are run by nationals of those countries. So Osai, who's the director in Nigeria, is a friend, and she's Nigerian. So whatever affects Nigeria affects her, affects her family, affects her family members. So she's not a non-Nigeria who's sitting and is cooking up trouble because she won't, if anything happens, she's on a plane going back to her home country. No, she's here. So I think that's one thing, but it's easy to spin because it allows people to be angry against the organization. That's number one. Number two, I think what's also interesting is that the people who consistently protest, who are there for 5 days or 1 day or however many hours, are organizations, again, as they are interestingly accusing Amnesty, that we don't see any other time. They're only available when they are supporting government to protest against a body that they feel is speaking negatively of government. And we call them paid protesters. So their services are procured.
Last year, some of them, after protesting against Amnesty International, also started protesting that they had not been paid.
Exactly. I think maybe they had agreed 2,000 and so maybe they received 1,000.
Or 500 naira.
Or something to that effect. Exactly. So I think also that lets you know that this is not as you said, representing us. This is not Nigeria and saying, oh, there's a problem here. These are people who are paid to do a job. And I mean, even if you look at the really well-phrased banners and all of that, it tells a story. But I think more importantly, and I guess I'll make that the third point, is the response of our security agencies to these issues. their response is always defensive. It is not true, they are against us, they are against us. And I'll use the Wall Street Journal article sometime last year that was published about mass graves in Borno. The guy had done an investigative report, found out that members of the Nigerian Army were being buried en masse in mass graves. The Nigerian Army came to say that the story was false, and that's all they said. They did not go to the Wall Street Journal and say, where did you find this mass grave, and investigate. Because if you really want to go to the bottom of it, the root of a story or a problem, you investigate, not just issue a statement from the comfort of your office and say that's not true. But what we do know, because as an organization, we've written Freedom of Information request, basically saying, look, when members of the armed forces die, we found that they were taken to University of Maiduguri. So we asked the university first, what do you do? Like, how are the families contacted? What's the process? The university said we should contact the army. So we contacted the army. The army basically said nothing. We wrote again, and then the army basically said, don't try it again. Don't write us again, asking for this information. So if that's the position of our security agencies, not only in terms of protecting me as a Nigerian, but also in terms of the welfare of the people who are laying down their lives daily to protect us. You are not giving account of those who die on the war front. You are not speaking to their family. You are not giving their entitlements. Then there is a problem. So it's much easier to frame Amnesty as the bad guy because they are foreign, but not address the internal issues that we know we have, which is why one day we say we've technically defeated Boko Haram. The next day we will say Boko Haram has morphed from insurgency to terrorism. The next day we will say we're almost there, but not quite there. So there is a problem. And if the armed forces, our security agencies are not honest about it, we will continue to have this problem that we have.
Prof, do you agree with Yemi, or you want to add to what she has said?
To a great extent, theoretically and empirically. Theoretically, the problem is simply a conflict between the requirements of international humanitarian law, which requires that the manner of treatment of stakeholders, combatants and non-combatants, well defined. Now, the Amnesty International is more concerned about international humanitarian law, which says that, look, government, you cannot do this, you cannot do that one. Part of the allegations levied against the government of Nigeria in their report is the factor of excessive use of force. Now, what does that one mean? That brings us to the empirical side. The military is looking at the fact that, look, we are also being killed by the Boko Haramis, by the terrorists. They use also more sophisticated weapons. Now, in an attempt to defend oneself, if, for instance, the Boko Haramis are using AK-47, why shouldn't the Nigerian military make use of AK-49? Now, in such a way that you must destroy your enemy before the enemy destroys you. So if, in this case, the government of Nigeria, the military in Nigeria, now have to make use of excessive force, left to me as an individual, I will describe that one as legitimate self-defense. But the problem now is that international humanitarian law does not allow for that. So the issue now is, do you want to die because of international law, or you want to survive so that you can amend, international law? The second issue is this. The Nigerian government, consistent with the submission of Yemi, is that, look, the position of the Amnesty International constitutes one side of the coin. The government of Nigeria's position constitutes the other. It's a routine matter. In 2018, the government of Nigeria accused UNICEF and asked UNICEF to pack out of Nigeria. All right? By that time, because of the intervention of the United Nations and the United States, UNICEF didn't check out, quote and unquote, didn't andrew out. Now, thereafter, the military here in Nigeria came up with the argument that UNICEF and the Amnesty International were aiding and abetting terrorism. All these have always been there.
Well, I guess there will be no
when
end to it, but we can, as Nigerians, continue to insist on respect for human rights.
Exactly.
And that the violation of human rights, for whatever reason at all, either on the grounds of self-defense or whatever, cannot be justified. Chike,
well,
what's
you
your
know,
take?
for me, they've said it all. We must appreciate the fact that, yes, war is an extraordinary thing. We don't expect the military to come out and say to us, this is everything we are doing, this is not what we are doing, because that way they'll be putting out even vital information for the enemies to see. But even against that background, there should be certain lines of engagement with the military and the civil populace in this war, being an insurrection, it's an unconventional war, and all of that, because they have to carry the people along. Don't forget that it's these same people that should act as a real, because we're not fighting another country, so it's not an all-out war. It is really guerrilla war and all of that. So information is critical to this war, and the people are the ones that will give them this information. So by alienating the people, the military is not also doing itself any good. It has to find a middle ground of staying safe. Yes, we appreciate the great work they are doing. We appreciate their sacrifice, you know, because it's not easy. Young Nigerians are dying every day. As far as I'm concerned, something needs to be done about the entire architecture and the rethinking and reworking of the whole strategy, because it is not working. This is exactly what they said when they jumped on Goodluck Jonathan and hounded him out. And now we are back to square one and even worse. We thought that, yes, a general was coming and that would be the end of the whole thing. You know, the Northerners are fully in charge of the security architecture. The North is being so terribly ravished. So what if it was even a Southern president that was there now? What will happen to Nigeria? These are the kind of thoughts that go through my mind. Because this is terrible. I mean, we all grew up in this country, and we saw what this country was. And what is happening now is becoming, I mean, what am I even saying? The chief of staff, no lesser a personality than him, has told us that there's Boko Haram even in this Lagos. I mean, you conducted that interview. I had chills run down my spine when I heard that. Nigeria is in trouble.
Well, yeah, I mean, before we move on to another subject, is it possible, really, that an organization like the Amnesty International could be exaggerating the situation in Nigeria in its reports, or could be, just, putting convenient facts together just to embarrass the government? Is it possible?
I don't think so, because they have more to lose. And I think what makes it, because it's also very easy to debunk. You counter a lie with facts. You counter misinformation with information. So if the army has a problem with the facts, then tell them to support it.
Okay.
No,
we have to go on a short break now. Here on Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show. Here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akinterenwa, Director General, Bolitech Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Chike Ogea, former Commissioner of Information, Delta State, and Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Now, let's take another subject. We'll go to the Middle East and President Trump and the AU, where African leaders at their recent summit have condemned U.S. President Donald Trump's Middle East peace plan as illegitimate. They took advantage of an African Union summit to express their solidarity with the Palestinian cause. AU Commission Chairman Musa Faki Mahamat told Assembly that a plan unveiled in late January by the United States represented the umpteenth violation of multiple United Nations and African Union resolutions. He said that it was prepared without international consultation and that it trampled on the rights of the Palestinian people, a line that drew applause in the main hall at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. Trump's long-delayed peace proposals were immediately rejected by the Palestinians, who had boycotted his administration over its pro-Israel stance. The Middle East plan, well, there's nothing original about it. A similar thing was proposed in 1979.
That's right.
But the international consensus is the two-state solution to the crisis between the Palestinian territory and Israel. you know, and a return to the pre-1967 border. But what is President Trump proposing? You know, clearly, as the African leaders are alleging, is too pro-Israel, because it means that Israel can now annex, you know, more territories, particularly within the Jordan Valley, you know, and also in Samaria and Jordan, you know, in that territory, and Judea, Samaria and Judea. And then they will annex territory. They will also have security control, even over areas that are, you know, Palestinian, designated Palestinian. So at the end of the day, the United States under Trump is doing something that, of course, the whole of the Middle East and now the EU are rejecting. But Trump's position is understandable. He has an evangelical Christian base that he has to appeal to election year. And of course, maybe Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also needs help, because he's going for another election on March 2nd. And, you know, this is an election promise from him that he will annex, you know, the West Bank. Prof.
Let me begin by not agreeing with one observation you made.
Yes.
That, well, the peace plan is not a big deal that we have something like that in 1979. In 1979, yes, you are right, we did have. But the fundamental difference now is that the United States is pressuring the international community not to comply with international law. And that's the critical and fundamental difference. International law has it that when any member state of the international community occupies, you know, a territory acquired on the basis of war, you cannot lay claim, you cannot have sovereignty over such territory. And that has been the major difference between the international community and the United States. You know quite well that the United States was the very first country to internationally recognize the state of Palestine in 1940, 1949. Now when you come back to the 1967 Six-Day War, the 1973 Yom Kippur War, now you will discover that the Judea, the West Bank, all those things you are referring to, Israel had occupied these places. Now, the international community is now saying to the people and government of Israel that you cannot have sovereignty over this place for a fundamental reason. This place you want to acquire as part of your own territory is meant for the purposes of the two-state solution that we have rightly pointed out. This is the eastern part of Jerusalem that will be part and parcel of the capital for state of Palestine. Now, what is this U.S. peace plan? It's predicated on three pillars. Agreement that there will be a state of Palestine. The second one is that Israel shall have sovereignty over the West Bank, which is in conflict with the position of the international community. That's why the problem is.
And even the previous position of the United States.
Yeah, look, yes, you are right, because at least Barack Obama was in support of the Palestinians having, you know, their state. But the third pillar of the Middle East plan of the United States is that Jerusalem will remain.
And will not be divided.
Will not be divided. Well, whereas the law, the international community says, look, they will divide Jerusalem. All right? So the U.S. position now is such that it is permanently in conflict with international practice and belief.
And it's also a policy of annexation and apartheid. But let's take another subject very quickly. An alleged plan to stage public protest tomorrow in Nigeria on the state of insecurity in the country has drawn a swift condemnation from the Nigerian presidency. The protest is also said to be aimed against the continued retention of service chiefs by President Muhammadu Buhari. This is causing concerns about the politicization of the military and command appointments, with the president's spokesman accusing the main opposition People's Democratic Party of sponsoring the march. Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Malam Garuba Shehu, claimed in a statement yesterday that the presidency received reports that the opposition had hired 2,000 men and women to embarrass the Buhari government through street protests on Monday, February 17, but the PDP fired back last night, saying the government should face a self-inflicted ordeal.
No, seriously, for me, I don't even think the problem is with the service chiefs. I think this war, you know, or the whole situation is compromised way above them. You know, we really have to look at ourselves and find out where the issues really are, you know. Service chiefs, no service chiefs. There's a commander-in-chief, you know. What really is his disposition to this whole thing? Those are the kind of questions I tend to ask myself. And the truth is, for now, you know, we, like I said earlier on, we are just more or less getting by because we can still do, you know, still go to work. Some parts of the country is functioning. But if the situation continues this downward spiral that it seems to be going, we might get to a stage where very soon, you know, we're still talking. And then we won't even be talking anymore. And, you know, real action will have to be taken.
Well, I mean, is this about the PDP versus government, or?
Even if it were, that's the role of an opposition. But I think it's, if they're taking the opportunity of insecurity to make a case. But I think it is about the service chiefs, because from a citizen's perspective, unless you want to go through the process of saying your commander-in-chief is being quite useless as a leader and we want to impeach him, the next thing is like, okay, look, show that you actually understand that there's a problem, see that the people you've appointed are not doing anything about the problem, and show us that you're doing something by removing them. So I think it's sort of a low-hanging fruit that citizens are saying, if we see action in this regard, it will show that you're paying attention and want something to change. Because if the same group of 4 people have been managing this process for the entirety of your tenure, and it's getting from bad to worse, then, and you refuse to change them, I mean, this is incompetence. And you refuse to do anything about that. What do we do with that?
Well, Prof, just in 1 minute, because we have to close.
Yemi said it, but he didn't say it all. One question. Mr. President went to Borno, and now the people are protesting. He was booed. Then the government will respond.
Well, the presidency claims that those persons were agents of the PDP.
Please hold on.
Regardless, regardless of who they were, he was butcher. Regardless of who they were.
We should even stop all
No. The issue, you raised a pertinent question. The issue is this. Was it not in Borno State that Mr. President got his highest number of votes?
85% of total votes cast.
Now 85%. Now, that was in March last year, almost a year. Suddenly, majority of the people who had confidence in you suddenly now have changed in such a way now that the PDP is now controlling the place.
And telling them what to do.
And then you now use the word miscreant.
Well, Prof,
please, you
on
see,
that note, we have to go.
No,
we have to go.
We need a special.
The conversation can continue offset. Yes, you've been watching Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching. See you next week.